Good evening and welcome to U Talk. We have a bit of a different question tonight. We would like to examine how to find the balance between convenience and an appropriate respect for the environment. Kyle and I both have extensive thoughts on these, though from some very different angles. But I'm going to ask Kyle to lead us away because he has recently seen some stuff pertaining to things we might think about more in our day-to-day lives. Kyle?
Yes. So this started with a conversation that I was having with someone about the the speech that Bill Maher essentially gave on fast fashion.
Mm-hmm.
He was speaking about how, ordering, 8 dresses and then sending back 7, that's a lot more carbon emissions. And then people going to the store or the shopping center, um, and picking out clothes and trying out clothes there. It's kind of inefficient because it's going to it's a trip for every single item, whereas and then it's multiple trips for the same items even. And there's also a lot more to it. There are clothes that are designed to be worn once and then thrown away. And it's this sort of crazy kind of situation we've got. And I was talking with my partner about this, and she put to me the question of what's the right balance between convenience and environmentalism. Where do we put the line? What can we do? How can we organize things in such ways to get the best of both worlds? And my being the kind of person I am, problem solving, and instantly let's go to the solution. My first thought was, well, why don't we have local warehouses where people can just pick things up?
And that's actually something that we are currently seeing a trend towards. There's a little what do you call them? Tourist trap, trinket shop, souvenir shop
Souvenir, yeah, souvenir
up
shop.
at Echo Point in Katoomba, near where I live. And if you order certain things off wish.com, all hail Wish, you can go to this store in Katoomba and physically pick them up because they've figured out that they can save a little money, save a little carbon by just batching up uh, a ludicrous amount of things and popping them at this store that is a little more local to me instead of having to
Hmm.
send it all the way to my house. And they're not the only ones who are doing this. We've seen the prevalence of click and collect and parcel collect happening with eBay, and often click and collect sites are like Woolies or Big W's. It's catching on slowly.
Hmm.
So certainly that's an idea. Your solution to that isn't novel. I hate to tell you, but I also love to
Well,
tell you that because it's a
most
good
of the best
solution.
solutions aren't.
Yeah,
Most of the
exactly.
best solutions, multiple people will think of them. I'm not the
Hmm.
first one to think of limits to donations in politics. In fact, it wasn't even my idea. I got it from someone who talks about US politics all the time. And
Oh God, they need the help. We
oh,
need the help too, but they need the help.
yeah, look, I almost think of them as a lost cause, but that's just me being cynical.
The great experiment
Um,
isn't over yet.
let's hope the keyword isn't yet. But back to convenience and environmentalism. I think it'd be I think part of the problem is the way we structure suburbs and cities and sort of townships and local areas, because we don't
Nah.
really structure them. Well, hear me out. Because remember the local community restoration project that Gem I came up with?
I remember.
So yeah, so the idea of the idea of that whole way of setting up local communities um, is essentially to get the best out of everything, but without having all of the damage that it can cause. For example, we want to have, effective local governments, but we don't have, the greatest local government boundaries. So, putting local reserves through them that, that'd put boundaries between them, and at the same time, it would bring more wildlife back into Sydney, for example. And so if we, as part of that, local community kind of restoration project, if we had local warehouses where people could go, we're talking like small ones, within walking distance, then people could walk 5 odd minutes, and they could collect they could collect what they order. I mean, we have post offices for that sort of thing, except, to send something through the post, that tends to cost a fair bit, especially if you're sending it long distance, which is why they have
It
private
really
delivery
doesn't.
services.
It really
Really?
doesn't.
A couple
Australia
of years
Post is
back when
one
I
of the
tried
most
to,
economical ways to move parcels around.
really? Because a couple of years
Yep,
ago when I was looking at sending something, to Perth, it was like $90.
the times have changed a little, but
Really? It's
I'd like,
gotten a whole lot better?
yeah, I'd
Okay.
like to cover the other end of convenience versus the environment. I was remarking to a friend earlier today that a huge problem with Africa as a continent is that you have this outside bit where there's water, and then you have this inside bit where there's not much of anything, really. But what we found is that in that little inside bit, there are a lot of things in the earth that we can use. Lithium, tantalum, molybdenum, a
Bunch of
number of
minerals.
metals with technical applications. So that's where my end of things comes in. Every 3 years or so, love that effective zoom. See, if I put it near my chest, it looks more sensible. Every
Yeah.
2 or 3 years, it's just expected that you change phones.
Hmm.
The manufacturer of the phone doesn't push the software updates anymore, and so if you try and do your online banking, someone might steal your credit card details. But
Hmm.
just accept that as a fact of life. The batteries in these phones aren't replaceable. They're made with lithium, among other things. The integrated circuits in these phones, well, obviously they're not replaceable. They're part of an entire assembly. But the amount of precious metals we use producing these phones is, at the individual scale, not very much. But when you look at an industry that churns out millions of units a year, it adds up. And we're expected to accept that after 2 or 3 years, this very nice, very expensive device is just going to be garbage. We are awful at recycling those metals. We're getting some progress on lithium batteries, which is good because they were one of the obvious targets. But most of
You
the
know,
things that we pull off these boards, we dip them in phosphoric acid, we recover the gold, and then we chuck them into a fire. And that's what we call recycling. Sometimes the display panels end up elsewhere for weird ass hackers to do weird projects with.
you know what? You know what I'm starting to realize? I think we haven't quite got the question entirely right. I mean, we kind of haven't. The problem doesn't
How do we
seem to
find
be
the
that people
balance?
want, well, the problem doesn't seem to be that people want convenience, because we can get convenience with, while taking care of
It's
the environment.
that a
The
certain
problem,
amount
the
of
problem is,
assumptions are made about what they need.
yeah, well, the problem is consumerism. Like the idea that we're meant to consume everything. Essentially, fast fashion. You consume the clothing, like you wear it once, you throw it away. Phones, you use it for maybe 2 years, and then it's expected you throw it away. We're going through resources, many of which are either not recyclable or they don't degrade over a short period of time. It takes, years. I mean, plastic takes millions of years, and there aren't a whole lot of ways to recycle plastic or have it break down. There are maybe two ways that I know of for plastic. One is this particular worm or grub that can actually eat it and metabolize it. And the
Yep.
other is this new like kind of chemical process
It's an
that I
enzymatic
don't know.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it. But what's the problem is consumerism, not really convenience, because we can still have convenience. The problem is we're throwing too much away, and at such a we're producing things at such a rapid. Okay, so on one end we're producing things at such a rapid rate that it is destroying the environment to meet demand. On the other
Hmm.
end, we're throwing things away at such a rapid rate that we are creating that demand.
Hmm. So
If we pass laws at this end to ensure that things that are made are things that will last, that are designed to last a long time, then they don't have to be thrown away as much at this end. And
that's not
therefore,
that's not the right way of going about it, unfortunately.
well, I think that's part of it.
Well, one of the
And I
things
think there's definitely more that needs to be done than that.
there's a question that I have which I want to address in the future, which is how do we find the balance of environmental destruction? Because that too is a balance point. These lithium batteries, I was going to reach up for one, but it's all the way over there and I'm lazy. See, I want convenience. I want my lithium battery just hover into my hand. They're really bad for the environment. But technology making use of them is an important part in the fight against climate change. Power walls and local storage systems for solar energy are an important part of fighting climate change. And if we don't bring everything we can to bear against that problem, it's not going to matter if some place that very few of us will ever visit in Africa has a giant sinkhole in it to meet demand. Because there's going to be very little left alive on this planet that we will recognize as intelligent. Which means that the USA might actually be preserved. Oh, blimey. There is a balance regarding short-term degradation of the environment to buy long-term environmental sustainability. And that is also a question that we need to examine. But in the meantime, I don't know, maybe we wouldn't have to buy things once if the fabric that it was made of didn't fall apart the moment it touched human skin. I've seen clothing that out of the box, the moment you put it on, tears along a seam line. And honestly, if it's going to do that out of the box, it's not worth repairing. Because it was obviously made so cheaply that the repair is going to become the next point of failure. Back in the 1960s, even, it was common to get a business shirt that was worn through a little bit and use the fabric to produce a little baby onesie. But there's a cultural shift that happened somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s, where we say, you know what? Our time is more valuable than to do this task. So we're going to get someone else to do it. And then mechanization meant that someone else was a machine which just spat out new baby onesies. And that business shirt, which was getting a few holes in the sleeve, never actually got recycled. We don't need a legislative shift. We need a cultural shift on that one. And I'm not actually sure how to bring that about.
Well, I mean, we've got the cultural, like we've talked about cultural mechanisms in the past, but I don't think the cultural mechanisms that we have in mind are designed to be able to take this off. They're designed to build on and expand culture, not to direct it. I mean, directing, like I've stuck away from directing culture for the most part. Building upon it, expanding upon it. Sure, directing culture, that's a bit more difficult. I think the thing is, culture in large part is determined by what you have available around you. If you have mountainous regions, you're going to develop a culture that reflects that. If you live in a place that's cold, you're going to develop a culture that reflects that. A place where all 4 seasons are very distinct, well, maybe your nature god will have 4 different states.
I don't know. I think if you live in a place where your 4 seasons are very distinct, what you get is Antonio Vivaldi.
I should know that. I know that name and I should know who that is, but I completely forget.
It's okay.
Uh,
Maybe you're a little old for that joke, but your kids will love it.
yeah. But that's the thing. It's culture in large part is determined by what you have around you. And if what you have around you is utter convenience, but at the cost of the environment, at the cost of resources, at a rate that is unsustainable.
Culture is also
Perhaps,
about what you value. And if we can teach people to value their natural environment in a way that maybe we've failed to do thus far, then maybe they'll understand that what they have around them is finite and under threat and should be preserved.
well, the thing is, though, I think people do to some degree understand that. Everyone kind of understands what climate change is. Everyone kind of understands, environmental destruction is bad. But what they don't understand is really what they can do about it. And unfortunately, the answer is not a lot. They can't really do a lot about it because they don't have options. They don't like, for example, they don't have the option of a political party that doesn't accept donations from large corporations, unions, special interest groups. Like basically, there isn't really a political party out there that's been running for elections.
Yeah, but they
They
do
haven't
have
had
the
that.
option to learn to sew.
Well, yes, but that's
Reframing
that's
this,
seen as a hobby these days. And some people do that, but also we're expected to work a lot more these days than people used to be in societies.
I
we're
know.
we're we're in an age where work is valued to such a degree that it takes precedence over everything else. And so we don't really have time to do a lot of that stuff. And while
So
some of our
ironically, if
generation
we gave
have taken
people
the
more
opposite effect.
money, if we gave people more money for the same amount of work, that ironically might mean that they were able to work less and that they were able to protect natural resources in this very real way because they'd have time to engage with this thing that otherwise would be seen as a frivolity.
Yes, that is actually true. So it seems what they need is time, a little bit more education on sort of what they can do on a personal level and also on a
Bring back
political
home
level.
ec, teach people sewing.
Probably.
I'm
So they need
serious.
time. I yeah, okay. So well, I'm not entirely like I kind of get what that is, but I don't know the details. We'll talk about it another time, but we're running out of time. So to finish up, what it seems like we need is for people to have time, for people to have an education, the knowledge of their options and the ability to engage and the knowledge of how to engage with um, different facets of society and on a personal level how to do things which are more sustainable. So they need to learn how to be sustainable. They need to have the time to learn that and implement it, and they need to be provided more and better options instead of just this wear it for one day and chuck it away crap.
Yep,
Their
that sounds
options
about
need to
right.
be better than that. So better options, more time, and an education on sustainability. those three things.
You
Yay,
make it
we
all
just
sound so
solved it.
easy.
Yeah. Well, everything sounds easy. Doing that will probably take a monumental effort, but everyone does a little bit here and there. Maybe we could do it. That being said, we've run over time, so we'll
Yep.
catch you all later. Thank you for watching, and
Take
have a good
care,
one.
and now would be a good time to learn to sew.
Yes, please do.
Good night.